She received the top award for performance in her teaching degree. She also was nominated and received an award for National Excellence in Teaching for her work at Parkville College, where she was on the founding team. So Parkville College, if you're not aware, is the school located within the juvenile justice system here in Victoria. She returned to Queensland, sadly, after many, many years. Family was calling. She's now the campus principal of the senior school at Palm Beach Currumbin State High, and one of you went there. Who is it? Two. There's two, and you didn't even know that you both went. So be sure to introduce yourselves to Alyce afterwards. And she's joined the board of Teach for Australia, and she serves also on the Audit and Risk Committee. And then we have Bruce. Bruce started off as a teacher, moved into school leadership, and led 3 school transformations. He continued to work in education, moving into the Department of Education, looking at first school workforce reform as an executive director, and as deputy secretary led school improvement in 1,540 government schools. And you'll get to hear a little bit more about that as his head of Regional Services Group. He's been part of delivering a lot of state reforms, and he's a very inspiring man. He's a good man. He's very values driven. He's got a deep sense of mission. And he's now serving as a special advisor, jack of all trades, man on call for the Secretary of Education here in Victoria. So without further ado, over to you guys.
Well, thanks very much for being here, Bruce. It's a pleasure to have you in its room of really experienced teachers now, 10 years in, and then also those that are really fresh-faced and excited to move into profession. You started off as a teacher, you were then a principal, a public servant, and then up to deputy secretary. In all of those roles and the varying things that you did, what was your favourite part about each of those positions?
Look, I think if I was trying to find a phrase, it's making a difference. You, as a teacher, you make an immediate difference in the lives of the children you teach. As you take on roles and responsibilities within a school, you start to grow your sphere of influence and hopefully create a setting in which more children achieve, and you create kind of collegiate and powerful networks of responsibility for the outcomes for all children. So I would never have thought, you know, if you look at my career and you think it's kind of planned and this trajectory to Deputy Secretary, I could never have possibly imagined when in 1986, it's a long time ago, you can tell by my hair colour guys, so that's okay, and I hope that you'll stay this long to get this hair colour in education, right? So we'll talk about that as a challenge to TFA later as we get to that conversation. But the back of a Mod 4 mission brown relocatable in a growth corridor school that was unruly, teaching opposite my wife, and my first responsibility looking into the staff room, which was utter chaos, and looking at all this lost property in the corner, the first job I took on for myself was, let's clean up this staff room, let's get a lost property system going, so that, you know, so that was my kind of first role. So seeing a need, jumping in, but wanting to make a difference.
Yeah, fantastic. And then you've obviously moved from being a teacher up to a principalship and then into the public service. What motivated you to take that jump from first planning how you clean up lost property through principalship and then the switch over out from schools into
it's been a bit of a theme cleaning up messes actually. So then I moved on to cleaning up the yard. We didn't have an environment program, and being a geography teacher kind of appalled me that the curriculum wasn't related to the thing that happened out. Yeah. This kind of disconnect between, you know, the thing that you learn, the knowing-doing gap, you know, it appears in our practice and it appears in kids because of the way that we enact our practice. And I was thrust into leadership probably before I was ready. I was, you know, geography kind of lead person, and then the person went on leave, and I took up coordination, became a faculty coordinator. And I think that what I learned in that process of taking on jobs rather than planning a career was the opportunities that open up, the things that you learn when you stretch yourself, the growing impact that you can have beyond your immediate kids. So it was this sense of, as a teacher, I make a difference to my class, and it wasn't until I became an acting assistant principal that I kind of thought, yeah, I want to be a principal. I want to create a powerful learning community in this place that brings all the parties around the village that raises children. So that was kind of the bit that propelled me, I think, that You could see your influence, you could see things happening that are immediate. And I think one of the things, particularly within schools, is that you see it happen very quickly. If you bring in a new program, you put forward a kind of curriculum plan, or you expand the nature of the curriculum provision, or you improve the kind of pedagogical enactment and make learning more authentic and more powerful for kids, you start to see the power of that. When you start to see a team that you get around you doing that, you think, wow, you know, we couldn't have done that. And we couldn't have introduced that whole wellbeing policy for kids, or we couldn't have had engagement with the community in that way. So I think the bit was about how do I stretch myself, and the principle was kind of the field of vision. I never envisaged myself taking the step into the public service, but being a principal in 2 schools, being an assistant principal, acting principal in another, I seized those opportunities because I wanted to take the theory that I was learning and reading about all the time and see if you could enact it in practice and create a powerful setting for children and young people to learn.
So it's clear through what you've said to us that really part of that motivation was being able to make an impact on a wide level strategically throughout the state. Tell us about a couple of the reforms that you made while you're in those positions of power and how you think they've impacted the state of Victoria.
Yeah, so I was principal of Baldwin High School, you know, kind of comfortable, leaky, in a ring school, and definitely different to the kind of high growth corridor schools that I've been in. I came into that, and it was really interesting because it was kind of pedagogically like going back in the TARDIS. You know, I'd gone from schools where teachers were struggling to keep kids in their seats and engage them, and so there was a lot of innovation and people were quite open to working together. You know, I kind of went into school in the middle of 2002, 7 computers connected to the internet, locked in a room that you had to have a pass to get into, death by worksheet, use of blackboards, and, you know, kind of, I think 1950 kind of curriculum. So what did that trigger in my mind about the next step for me? It was when there was investment from government that was around the time that I met Larry, where they were looking at Larry Kemmener, who's been a wonderful chair and sponsor of TFA and advocate for TFA, was really around how do you system reform. And it sort of awakened my, you know, there's a system that I belong to as well as my school, and so you feel the vision grows, and government was making an investment, roles were opening up, and so I took that step in. So one of the 2 bits that I really feel like have been very important to me, one was the opportunity to become the inaugural director of the Bastow Institute of Educational Leadership in Victoria, which is really about my belief that unless you get outstanding leadership in school settings who create the conditions for the teachers to learn, then you can't really adequately meet the challenges of children learning well. And so that was, the Institute is now 10 years, like TFA. I've had an association kind of at the fringes of TFA since 2009, because I was appointed into the department in June 2009 to establish the Institute. It was in that same group that TFA was funded out of. So I've been kind of known Melody for that time, and whilst the paths have not kind of connected all the time, setting up that Leadership Institute and looking at, in the time that I was there in 5 years, 12,000 school leaders had access to capability development. As we move on now, it's tens of thousands more. And so this opportunity to establish something that has institutional life and culture that's responsive to government and responsive to the profession, that builds the esteem that people need investing in. You know, this kind of human capital investment strategy is, if you want people to become more expert, you've got to invest in the development of their knowledge and skill and build great leaders, so that's fine. The other one as Deputy Secretary, I think, is investing in the development of a coherent, integrated reform agenda in Victoria around the education state, and leading out with school workforce reform that I was responsible for again, and particularly around creating evidence-informed tools and resources that teachers could use to inform their practice in collaborative groups and settings. So setting up the system and architecture and getting people to work together and restoring the public nature of the public system is something that I feel is very important to me.
Yeah, fabulous. I want to go back to the Bastow point that you just raised, because I think we brush over what was quite an achievement, but I think most people in this room tonight would know exactly what the Bastow Institute does. And in fact, a big part of its mission is to grow leaders. in your experience there, what were some of the most important traits in leadership that you saw come through or needed to be taught, speaking to a room of aspirational leaders, whether at the start or mid-career?
Yeah, I think that there are new capabilities that emerging people need. So I'll premise what I'm about to say with the fact that I think that the field and scope of leadership is ever evolving. But I think the premise that I had was that leadership is learnable. That's the first premise. That just like you can grow capability in children, knowledge, skills and dispositions, in the same way adults and leaders can be grown. I don't believe in trait theory. I believe that some people dispositionally and because of personality and background and family of origin and experiences might be more predisposed to be able to lead. And sometimes context and situations drives for leadership that's drawn out of you. So those two things can be true, but my basic premise is that we should grow at leadership. So you asked me specifically what are the kind of traits. Well, I think leading people, leading self, leading change, kind of core components wherever you lead. Leading through people, once you go beyond a direct contact with a group, whether it's a group of adults or a group of children, a group of young people, that's not mediated. But as soon as you have to lead something else, you have to lead through people by developing a shared vision, being really clear about purpose, understanding what your core values and commitments are that drive an alignment between your behaviour and your values commitments, which we'll talk about when we talk about TFA's value proposition. So these are kind of core things. So knowing your purpose, leading others, being self-aware. And that's kind of the big wrestle all the time in leadership, I think, is because there are fields of view that we don't have because of who we are in the world. You know, I'm situated as a white Anglo-Saxon male who has lived all of his life in Melbourne. And so because of that, I bring a whole range of strengths and opportunities, I hope, but you also bring a whole range of unconscious biases and conscious biases to the way in which we're situated in the world. So I think being able to, one of the strong capabilities that you need to develop is self-awareness. And then there's a whole range of, depending on the context that you find yourself in, a whole range of technical skills that you might need to learn as well, which I know that you would have been experiencing as you move up very quickly. You're thinking, well, I now need to learn about human resource management and financial management and compliance and risk and governance. But they're kind of technical skills. But on the transformational side, it's about how do I lead and inspire other people to do things greater than they thought that they might have been able to accomplish on their own.
Yeah, fantastic. So I think the key message that we heard there was that it's about leading people, and I think our new associates will soon see that really it starts with leading the children that will be in your classrooms and then the more experienced ones, leading the staff that are around you in their capacity. Also importantly, I heard it might be for the new associates and those that are in cohort 1, you'll soon be writing leadership assignments, I'd say, and so it's good to hear from cohort 1 that a trait-based leadership can be learned, in Bruce's opinion, which is a fantastic thing to think we can all grow into those positions. Now, talking about leading people, Bruce, you obviously sat in that position as a principal, and you would have been quite privy in leading your staff to some of the complaints that they might have of why measures can't be taken or achievements can't be made, and often that will then be deflected, that the measures aren't made because of departmental kind of blocks that they come up against. Being in that privileged position and seeing that, what would you now tell principals about being in the department that they might not see from that school leadership position?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. It's one that I've wrestled with a lot. I mean, I've been really privileged. I've been a teacher. I've been through every leadership role in a school. I had regional roles. I came into the centre. I had a director, executive director, deputy secretary. So kind of this long slow burn to the top has meant that I've learned a lot. So I think that there are two propositions that I would put to you. Where you stand determines what you see, and who you listen to determines what you hear. So if you're going to develop new understandings, you need to shift your perspective. And I think that part of the challenge for the education system, the public education system, is to recognise that wherever you are a member of the department. Yes, you have a school location, but it's funded through taxpayer investment. Governments make a decision about money that comes in as revenue and they apportion it to to health, education, justice, and so on. They make a commitment. And so I think that part of truly becoming a professional is to understand the different layers that exist within the system, and that we all have different roles and responsibilities, and we often don't understand them until we step into them, and then we get a clearer understanding. So you're a teacher, and you become a domain leader, a team leader, a health and wellbeing leader, and suddenly there's a whole new vista of complexity that you didn't have to deal with before. So you're a student learning and wellbeing manager or year level coordinator, whatever the title might be, and you're dealing with a child that's been exited out of a classroom because of an incident. And suddenly your role and perspective shifts, because that teacher comes to you and says, why are you siding with that child? I thought you were going to suspend them, Alyce. And you go, no, but I think we need to sit down and talk because that child's got a whole lot going on. You're not supporting me. And suddenly you're in a whole new set of circumstances because your positional authority and your responsibility shifted. Then if you become an assistant and so on. I remember that when I became an assistant principal and acting assistant principal in the school in which I had very, very strong collegiate relationships in the school, so I was there for 14 and a half years with a whole lot of different roles and responsibilities. And people came to me and they said, you've changed, Bruce. And I felt really challenged by that because I felt that I hadn't changed, and I was growing into the role, of course. But suddenly I had roles and responsibilities and accountabilities that accrued to my positional responsibility within the school. And people saw me differently when I was having to take actions in relation to the management of staff, the performance of staff, and a whole range of other decisions as a member of a leadership team. I think that's true that we misunderstand how tough it can be at the central office to mediate good public policy in a political nexus between government, a minister, and its department. And it's the minister's department. And democracy means that you've elected a government and there's a cabinet that's formed in the executive that has responsibilities. And ministers have accountabilities, and senior departmental public servants do as well. And so there's lots of challenges. I think we misunderstand each other. I mean, one of my biggest challenges I gave at a public forum last year was one department. One department. Let's get to know each other, because unless every level's working up and down well, just like in a school, if not all the teachers are joined up, that issue of collective efficacy, you can't get the powerful impact. I believe that to be true about departments that are fragmented at each level.
There were some gems of quotes in there if you didn't get them. One that stuck out, and I don't have a pen and I'm remembering that it's who you listen to that determines what you hear, which I think resonated through your whole response there, Bruce, that you as a leader in a school, and it doesn't really matter whether you're the teacher that's leading or the principal that's leading, it's the weight of the voice that you're hearing that will determine your response, and sometimes that is challenging. And reflecting on my own leadership, I can also see that listening to the voice of 150 staff or listening to the voice of 2,500 students. And although the voice of the staff that are 150 might be strong, the students need to carry weight as well, and I think that's really what each of our associates will experience as they go into education is where to place that weight and how to temper your responses to each of those different voices. I guess talking about voices that kind of rattle around both in schools and at that departmental level, you're now a step removed from the department and perhaps more at liberty to speak broadly about education and what you really feel are the most important issues that we face today. Is there something now that you would comment on to really put a challenge to the people in this room to work on that you maybe weren't at liberty to expose as an issue when you were that tight in the department?
Sure. I mean, you have, as a public servant, you have public obligations. You take up a public office, and there are things that you need to hold in confidence that are related to cabinet and confidence matters. A whole lot of things that you can't speak out on because of the nature of policy of the government today. And good public servants, I think that's one of the things that I really learned about being a public servant is I came to respect what it means to act with integrity, to implement the agenda of government. You may not necessarily agree with some of those policies. And we saw that bravery if you've been watching any of the impeachment hearings where a brave civil servant said, I don't want to politicise this issue. This is really important that we don't say that it's this country that's doing it as opposed to, the Ukraine did it, as opposed to Russia. There's plenty of evidence. And it's that kind of impartiality that I grew to really respect. So you're asking, taking the lid off that, what do I really think? Well, I am still engaged in the Office of the Secretary, and I am still down at Bastow again for a return stint 10 years later, so, some mild constraint, but let me try. So one of the things that I would first say is that at the senior policy level, I think that in terms of leadership and challenge, my challenge to the Central Office in particular in setting strategic policy is embed people that are doing the work. Embed principals, embed teachers, embed support staff as part of your team, so that even if you have to do it, you can do it better because you have engaged at the front end of policy cycle, sort of strategic policy, implementation, service delivery, impact, and kind of that feedback loop. Don't sort of develop the policy, document the glossy, and sort of throw it across the fence and hope for the best, and we see quite a bit of that, which is what frustrates teachers. So, lifting the lid. My passion is secondary school reform, and we're nowhere near it. We're nowhere near anywhere around the country that I can see really grabbing hold of this issue about children who are turning up who are alienated from their own learning, and then children who are disaffected and not attending school, and then the dropout rates from kids that are vulnerable, have a whole lot of insufficiency in their personal lives that may drop out. They don't even necessarily get picked up in the training system or the higher education system. And so I think this debate that we're having about what are the appropriate measures for the end of schooling, what does a learner profile look like? If you like, Larry would be happy to hear me talk about this. What's the balanced scorecard? So what is this learner profile that's more than a number? I mean, where else do you go? You get a number other than, waiting in the line at the deli, and you can pull off a number, and it's, number 47, you're thinking, oh gosh, starting at 32, and you know how long you have to wait. So, I mean, the issue is that I think there are constraints by secondary schools being a filter for university courses, particularly prestigious ones, that relied upon a filtering system when secondary schools were designed to take about 30% of kids that are most able to take them on to university, and the rest of them went into other forms of work or kind of vocational training. That's no longer adequate. We've got uncapped courses, we've got universities choosing to do a whole range of other methodologies, portfolio assessments and others outside of that kind of ATAR. So I think there are issues around that may be a component of it, but what are the other important components that we're building in to help people kind of get a profile? Because the interesting thing being a principal of a school is, and you'll see this as teachers if you teach at year 12, is that at the end of the year, before the exams, or just after, before they get their results, they come and see you and say, Miss, will you give me a reference? Will you give me a reference? And so you've got teachers writing down, they're involved in debating and chess club, and, over the years they did this, because that's the profile that they think that might actually round out the number. So on one hand, we've kind of got this difficult discourse, the number doesn't matter, but it's kind of determinative. So, and it drives results pedagogically through that, right down into junior school and middle school and secondaries, I think. So I think, it's right for innovation.
And look, you've hit on a passion point of mine there, sitting in senior secondary education, Bruce, and I think what we're talking about is innovation in the system for a holistic education upon exiting, particularly with the way that tertiary entrance is going.
Yeah.
How can we better judge our students so that we can see what they need for real success? And it may not be tertiary education in the future, and it may well be down the path of innovation. Have you seen systems around the world, really, in your experience, operating at such a high level of the department that actually are good examples of what that innovation in secondary education might look like?
I have to say I haven't traveled enough to be able to answer that question directly. I have read and learned about through the Global Education Leadership Partnership that I was part of for a number of years, innovation more broadly about the kind of ecosystem and partners that are needed to bring about innovation. There are kind of oases of excellence in innovation in every system where you can find that there are schools that are trying to tackle some of these kind of structural, cultural and pedagogical issues. And there are all sorts of complex questions that come up about, if it's only a portfolio, can it be gamed by, wealthy parents or friends, or in social capital within your home. Tests are kind of, at least everyone's sitting under the same conditions with the same set of questions. So there's kind of really tough intellectual questions. But there are schools around the world that are really trying to grapple with this. Some of them come out of kind of charter school movements and so on, which I have some concerns about because I'm a strong advocate for a healthy, vibrant, well-invested public education system that welcomes all children regardless of background and circumstance. But there are so few that I could probably tell you the names of the ones that I know, and you can probably Google and find 10 others. I think that across the kind of advanced economies, we're wrestling with what this looks like, both what is the mix of cognitive and applied, and it's interesting that higher education is also wrestling with how more applied should their courses be when they've been highly academic and cognitively driven. So at some point it's going to be a point of convergence.
And if I go back, I love that phrase that you just used of oasis of innovation that exists within pockets of the country. And I think it's a really important point for us sitting in the audience, either going into schools or 10 years into our experience in education, that you can build pockets of innovation, and linking to a further point backwards that it's not the department's blame. There's actually a lot of ways around the existing rules where we can innovate in the current system. While we may not operate in a world of perfection, there are ways to innovate for creative solutions to catch those students that need our help. And I think a lot of the Teach for Australia alumni are actively creating those pools of innovation as we speak. Look, give you a magic wand, Bruce. What would you create overnight if you could wave it and get to that kind of perfect system?
I read that question and I wrestled with it all the way here. Given that the magic wand's not coming and Superman isn't either, it's kind of up to us. And I think that that's my answer. It's up to us, it's up to everyone in the room. And that often you don't know where the breakthrough point is when you get that kind of tipping point that pushes classrooms, schools, systems into better places. You just don't know where the kind of tipping point is. If I had a wand that tipped the scales, I would say within the public system that the scales would tip towards collaboration and collective responsibility for all children, vis-a-vis competition for numbers and enrolments. That's one, if it was just within the government system. If I had a wand that would work, I would say we really need to still face into some of the funding challenges in the different sectors. I'm not sure that we have got to the genuine heartbeat of what was envisaged by Gonski.
I love a good realist. Magic wands don't exist, but we can work towards those perfect solutions. Look, if we move on now to, I guess, more specific questions related to Teach for Australia, you've been a champion of the organisation for some years now. What do you see as TFA's contribution to educational excellence and really closing that gap with our students?
Yes, it's interesting because it's a challenging question in some ways because TFA has kind of been hammering away for a number of years, and the original cohorts in the room is really lovely, and we've kind of got this new group here today. And I think that what I see is that TFA has the opportunity to bring excellence and equity together. Often they're twin pillars of system reform, and you're kind of countervailing. So on the equity axis, you're trying to get more kids into school, 10,000 kids that go missing each year. How do we stop them, kind of incentivise them, saying, care for them enough, know them enough, so that they don't drop out. But if they've left, how do we get them back into the education system, either in school or training or alternative settings? And the interesting thing is that you can push on that and you bring more kids back in and your results might go down at school, right? Because you've got kids that are not as literate, not as numerate, not as socially well adjusted. So that puts the threat to the kind of excellence equation. On excellence, you can kind of screen out, you can marginalise, you can make people not welcome, you can not have inclusive school communities that deal with kids with special needs and disabilities, so you can pump your results up. You can tell kids, parents, don't get them to sit the test. You can do VCE and not have it scored, do it unscored. So there are all these things in which you can kind of messages into the system to try and, on this axis. But highly talented people like you in the room, who are committed to going to hard staff, disadvantaged, are bringing excellence into the equity equation and not marginalising it. So you're not doing either or, you're doing both and, just by your value stance and by choosing to go into education when you could choose to do other things, and being highly capable people, so that would be that.
Excellent. Excellence into equity, I like that one.
Yeah.
Look, I'm going to close up with a final question before we open up to see whether there's some questions from the audience. But we're sitting in a room of 130 people about to embark upon their journey into education, and another 25 or so of the 45-strong cohort that have now been in the game for 10 years. What advice would you offer to those about to enter in those 10 years into their path?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And I think the main encouragement would be this: stay curious. You know, that's kind of a famous quote from Steve Jobs, but he was actually quoting Einstein. You know, curiosity has a reason for existing in and of itself. Keep questioning. And so I think that wherever you are in any line of work, you can become enculturated and you can be tired by the kind of exigencies of the daily challenges. So that's the first thing that I would say, is remain curious and hungry. If you want to lead, keep reading. If you don't read, don't lead. Yep. That's the challenge, because when you're busy, the kind of intellectual engagement drops off and you kind of get buried into your subject and lesson plans. And I understand that there's a period to really do that. So my encouragement would be, if you want to be a leader in a school setting, win the confidence of your colleagues by being an outstanding teacher first. And until you think that you're excellent in your practice, ward off the risk to get drawn off into other things. Because once you know the kind of heartbeat, the messaging systems of schooling are curriculum, pedagogy and assessment, and relationships that drive care and well-being and belonging and confidence, and create that safety and that nurturing environment so that children can learn. So be excellent first, because there's a lot to learn in the art and science of teaching. And then grow your influence, because people will trust you when you are wanting to mediate your influence around that core work. So stay curious, read, and if you want to lead, make sure that the core stuff's right.
Excellent. There's been some really valuable insights that you've offered us, Bruce. I wonder whether there's some little questions spurring in the audience. We have about 10 minutes or so, and so I'd love to take a few questions if anyone out there has them. We'll start over here.
So in my experiences as a learner, I have found it really difficult to reconcile adhering and meeting expectations when it comes to academia and marks and progress to the general love of learning and general education and learning. As someone who's going into teaching now, many people here, what could be some advice we can take on board to helping students reconcile the love of learning with the academic expectations?
Yeah, look, I think that if you cast assessment, I think that's what you're saying, is that assessment and measuring people around academic content of some sort, does that necessarily alienate learners from the content? I think it has risks of doing that. But if they understand that you're assessing for a purpose, so what is that purpose? You're always assessing. We're all of us making judgments, informal and formal. Tests are one form of formal judgment making about the acquisition of knowledge and skills, so that students are no more able to do more. And so, but we're also reading the room. We know when kids are off task, when kids are, the energy's flagging in the room. We're making all sorts of judgments. So I think the more that we can make our practice explicit to children about what we're doing and why we're doing it, I think brings the heat out of the high stakes nature of some tests. That I'm an A student and I'm an E student, I'm never going to be good at math. That's the most common one in Australia, right? As if we'd allow people to say that culturally, and I'm no good at, reading and writing, but, we can't say it about listening and speaking, but I'm not good at math. The interesting thing is, I think that if they know that you're getting assessment, you're reading back how well you're teaching. Because if you've got a whole group of students, you look across and there's themes through the question stems where students haven't succeeded in acquiring the knowledge that you hope that they would, you have got a powerful driver back into your practice that they need to know that. They need to know that I'm assessing you so that I can help you get better, and you're helping me get better as a teacher. And so it's this powerful feedback loop. So, because wherever you go in any aspect of life, there are tests and there are judgments that are made about your performance. And so I think it's best to be open about that. And if you create a nurturing, caring environment, they read out of your passion. They read out of your belief that they can learn. One of the most powerful things that we can do is signal through our stance, the way we interact, our belief that they can learn. And it's so empowering. And of course we all have different skill sets, and you may not be as good at this thing, but you're going to nurture their talent and their passions and their interests, and awaken other interests that they didn't know were possible. But I think when you take threat out of it, they go to a workplace, they're going to have a performance and development plan, they're going to have people giving them feedback, they're going to have people making assessments about whether they've got a career trajectory, or whether they're on a particular path, or whether they'll get remuneration. Life's full of tests, so building resilience is a really important thing as well.
Right, and I think resilience is a really important factor in our kids' groups, and like you said, I think I'd surmise that as they sense your energy when you walk into the room, and it's the energy that you put out, both about how you're going to structure the lessons and the love of learning the content that they ultimately will be tested on, and it's the reality of life. Questions that are out there, up the back.
So my question is, I guess, about top-down and bottom-up innovation. So with the view that sort of it trickles down from the political class through department into schools, when the authorising environment and I guess the shape of reform is often ultimately down to quite a small ministerial team, how can you translate those sort of potentially bottom-up, like oases of innovation, into something larger that is actually authorised by the top?
Yeah, scaling innovation is it's a thing, in any industry, particularly in education. And I think the question has been since about the year 2000, 2002, why Victoria hasn't been able to scale its excellence across classrooms, across schools. I mean, you will go into schools where the between classroom differences are far more powerful than the between school differences. So the difference between your teaching and the person that far away from you is greater than the distance in terms of outcomes in the school down the road. That's the facts. And so I do believe in bottom-up, top-down, and joining in the middle, laterally in particular. And so the power of the collective of teachers, if you are working on a different way of framing the curriculum, writing the curriculum, different pedagogical enactment, and you're innovating. However you might be innovating, you're connecting it to the real world, you're bringing in people, whatever it might be, it leads to burnout. You have to find colleagues that you work with and network with in a school to grow innovation. My belief is that you learn to innovate, it's learning. It's not saying there's one thing here and we're going to transplant it over here. I think that's the challenge I've tried to frame, I suppose, as a system leader that it's about scaling learning rather than scaling innovation. You have to learn to do the work by enacting the work, and you have to learn it with colleagues to do it better and to do it well and to scale it. In your faculty or whatever it might be, your key learning area, your domain area, whatever it might be, your team, that's the first issue of scaling. See if you can scale it there. And then scale it to school. And then I think there are barriers to school scaling, which are quite complex. We don't have time to get.
And Bruce, I guess the key message that I've heard through a few of your points, and particularly that one on innovation, it's about collaboration, and it's about a system-level approach to collaboration to allow that innovation to actually be heard by others that might benefit from it and tailor that to their approach.
Yeah. So just to, if I may, just come back, because I think it's a really important point, I had another thought, is that there is no policy that I'm aware of that says that you shouldn't try to get better outcomes for kids. Show me where that policy is written, right? So if you're getting better outcomes in terms of their engagement, their well-being, their attendance, their academic achievement, and that's happening, that's where people go and visit. They want to have a look at what's going there. They want to try and, why don't people fly in to look at high-tech high school in San Diego, as I did in 2008? Because it's innovative. And it's getting results with kids that had never had any of their generational poverty, never had kids go to college over there or university. And so when the policy pendulum swings, or you get policies that you don't think quite fit a school context, you can spend a lot of time hitting your head against that kind of, that object that's not moving. But you can focus on the things within your locus of control. And I tell you that there's no government that's going to stand in the way of you helping kids be more literate, more numerate, more socially engaged, socially responsible. That's the main game in town. Outcomes.
Thanks, Bruce. We have time for probably 2 more questions. So if you think you have a burning question or a particularly great one, no pressure, but stick your hand up now, and we've got you up the back.
Hi, my name's Sonia. I've been a teacher for 7 years, and I started in the Teacher Australia program. From time to time, I get an email from the department asking if I'd like the chance for a fast-paced corporate change to do an exchange in the department. And I always reply the same way, which is no, but I'd gladly host anyone from the department to come and visit me and follow me around. And no one's taken me up on my offer yet. I'm interested to hear your perspective on maybe the senior leaders that you've worked with. What was their proximity to schools? What was their interest in being on the ground or the factory floor, as it might be called? And is there room for that to improve that connection?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely no doubt that there's opportunity to improve it. So part of the first effort by the previous Secretary, Jill Cullister, was to start the Pathways to the Department's Central Office program. And I think that was to try and get people in Central Office connected to practice, really, in a different way. So the part of that notion I talked about before, getting people to be involved in school program design, school policy design, implementation, delivery, and so on. There's no doubt that the current Secretary, Jenny Atta, has had her senior staff all go out this term and spend time in educational services in early childhood schools and skills, mainly in schools, and spend time there. Now, I don't think necessarily that you can learn a lot about the culture and practice of a school by spending a day there, any more that I might be able to learn about car manufacturing by going to a car manufacturing plant by having a walk around it. So I think that it's a deeper issue about how people understand their role in the system and what they're stewards of and what they're responsible for and what they're doing. And how they're serving government. Once you get to the central office, there's a lot of focus on serving your minister, serving government, making sure the policy is implemented. As I said to you, where you stand determines what you see, who you listen to determines what you hear. So who should you listen to and where should you stand? So that's the question, isn't it? So my view would be that it's the view always from below. That's my premise, is that you should look at, if you're a teacher, particularly if you're a principal, when was the last time you stood by the lockers in the canteen queue? Did you get out of your car and walk the 4 blocks of the kids coming in, so you found them at the tram stop, the bus stop, the local shop? What do they do when they go going home? Where do they go to? So you're trying to shift your perspective. I think that the board of the Education Department here is very conscious of this issue and really trying to engage with what it means. But when you're a very busy senior executive and your day is completely full, shifting your position and saying, well, we'll carve out 5 days in a year where people go out and they kind of do a, internship, has a lot of overhead. If you've got you're in charge of the critical incident and response unit and you're managing bushfires and, you book this week to go, it's probably going to work, right? So there's all sorts of practical things that get in the way, but I take your point. I think that the more that we can learn about each other's work, the more sympathy and empathy we have, the different roles are required. But if I had a bias, it's a bias towards practice and the place of practice.
And Bruce, if only we could have more of you that have been principals to actually go to that level of Deputy Secretary, I think the better the system will be for it. All right, one last question from the group. Down the front.
As a group of early teachers, what suggestions do you have for us to increase our agency for affecting innovation within the schools that we go to?
Yeah, I think that the proof point is do you live in the house of your own ideas? So if I came and visited your class and I sat in it and interacted in it, is the kind of pedagogical content knowledge, the pedagogical enactment, giving expression to your values, and can I see it? Can I touch it? Can I hear it? And to have a sense of agency, I think, and this is kind of the thing that I was going to finish on. Do I get a little wrap up now?
Absolutely. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
I do it now. Because I think that, what's the value that TFA adds, and what would I recommend for the current cohort as well as the 2010 cohort is TFA needs to conceptualise itself as a social movement. And so what does social movement theory really say? And it's often small cadres of people that make a very big difference. So it was only in 2018, that Greta Thunberg from Sweden, stood outside the Swedish parliament, protesting. Now, nobody would have thought that she would become a global leader around our kind of climate crisis. So it's interesting to think about who are the people that I need to build alliances with. And what we often get drawn to is drawing alliances with people who are most like us. And that's a good place to start. You grow more influence when you're actually building bridges to people who don't think like you, don't kind of get it, that may resist your innovation in working with them. Because when you get people who you wouldn't normally expect to take on some of the things that you think are important in terms of innovation, the people who are wrapped up behind that point of view see the person starting to shift, and it makes you more influential. So I think it's, bridging and bonding capital. It's you bond with the people that are like within your tribe, and we feel quite safe doing that, so we'll innovate with innovators, and you marginalise your influence to the three teachers. You work out how the three of you garner somebody who's over here in this camp into your work, and you listen deeply to them and understand why they have resistances, and you suddenly find the policy churn over 15 years, we tried that before and it didn't work, and you listen into that story and you find the point that you might be able to create an ally. And I think that that's my encouragement, if I could say, to TFA. You need to network like you have. It's great that the 2010 cohort is still talking to each other, still networking. The power of TFA is finding alliances with people that think like you, that want to innovate. Social Ventures Australia, Big SRC on student voice, the Smith family on disadvantage in education, because that's where the power of your networks grows. That's kind of that exponential impact. You have a strong sense of social mission and social purpose around disadvantage, which is kind of a strong values alignment for me. The least, the most vulnerable, the disenfranchised, the left behind, those that don't have access, we need to enfranchise into a public education system. But we can't do it on your own. And so joining networks. My closing thing is, I never thought that when I was doing lost property or the environment or looking after a couple of faculty areas that I'd be a deputy secretary. One of the big criticisms of TFA is retention. You never know if you hang around long enough where you might be to have a whole lot of influence. So think about staying. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say a big thank you on behalf of myself and all the associates for your time, your service, your insights, as well as your provocations. And I really love the idea of where you stand and what you see, and so I've challenged myself and everyone in this room to constantly stay curious and be open to different perspectives. And I'm really looking forward to, over the next 4 weeks, getting to know everyone so that we can really harness the power of our collective efficacy and give hope to the idea that we can reconcile excellence and equity. So thank you.